Listen to me carefully. For the next few moments, I want you to suspend every excuse you've ever made, every label you've ever accepted, every limitation you've ever agreed with. Because what I am about to say to you is not information. It is transformation, if you allow it. There is a conversation happening in your life that nobody else can hear. It doesn't come through your phone. It doesn't come from your friends. It doesn't come from your family. It doesn't even come from your environment. It comes from you. And whether you realize it or not, that conversation is shaping your entire life. You see, the greatest influence on your future is not your past. The greatest influence on your future is not your circumstances. The greatest influence on your future is not even the people around you. The greatest influence on your life is the voice you listen to the most. And that voice is your own. Every single day, you are speaking to yourself. When you wake up, you speak. When you fail, you speak. When you succeed, you speak. When things go wrong, you speak. When things go right, you speak. The question is not whether you are talking to yourself. The question is, what are you saying? Because your words are not just sounds. Your words are seeds. And whatever you plant consistently in your mind will eventually grow in your life. If you plant doubt, you will harvest hesitation. If you plant fear, you will harvest paralysis. If you plant insecurity, you will harvest limitation. But if you plant truth, real truth, you will harvest power. Now listen to me. For 3 days, just 3 days, I want you to change the conversation. Not forever, not for a year, not for a lifetime. Just 3 days. Because some of you are overwhelmed by the idea of permanent change. But anyone can commit to 3 days. And those 3 days can shift the trajectory of your entire life. For 3 days, I want you to speak to yourself differently. When you wake up in the morning, before you check your phone, before you listen to anybody else, before the world tells you who you are, I want you to tell yourself who you are. Not based on how you feel, not based on what happened yesterday, but based on what is true about your potential. You must say to yourself, I am not average. I am not ordinary. There is something in me that has not been fully expressed yet. Because most people are not living their life. They are living their conditioning. They are living what they were told. They are living what they experienced. They are living what they believe they deserve. But you were not created just to repeat patterns. You were created to break them, and the breaking begins in your mind. So for 3 days, when that voice inside you says, you're not good enough, you must answer it immediately. You don't negotiate with it. You don't entertain it. You don't sit with it. You replace it. You say, that is not the truth. I am growing. I am learning. I am becoming stronger every day. Because whatever you tolerate in your internal conversation becomes your reality. Some of you have been agreeing with lies for years. You've been saying, I can't do this. I'm not smart enough. I don't have what it takes. People like me don't succeed. And every time you say that, you are signing a contract with limitation. You are giving permission for mediocrity to stay in your life. But for 3 days, I want you to cancel those agreements. I want you to interrupt those patterns. I want you to take authority over your own mind. When you make a mistake, and you will, don't say, I'm a failure. Say, I am learning faster than before. When something doesn't work out, don't say, this always happens to me. Say, this is working for me, even if I don't understand it yet. When you feel fear, and you will feel it, don't say, I'm scared. Say, I am stepping into something bigger than my comfort zone. Because fear is not a signal to stop. Fear is a signal that you are at the edge of growth. And the way you interpret that signal determines whether you move forward or shrink back. Now hear this clearly. Talking to yourself is not about pretending. It is not about ignoring reality. It is about redefining it. Because reality is not just what is happening to you. Reality is also how you respond to what is happening to you. And your response begins with your words. For 3 days, I want your words to align with your potential, not your past. Stop describing yourself based on your history. Start speaking based on your destiny. Even if you don't fully believe it yet, say it anyway. Because belief is not always the starting point. Sometimes belief is the result of repetition. The more you say it, the more your mind begins to accept it. The more your mind accepts it, the more your behavior aligns with it. And the more your behavior aligns with it, the more your life reflects it. That is how transformation works, not in one moment, but in consistent, intentional conversations with yourself. Now let me warn you, the first day will feel strange because you are going against years, maybe decades of negative conditioning. Your mind will resist you. It will try to pull you back into old patterns. It will say, this isn't real. This isn't working. You're just fooling yourself. But you must persist because your mind has been trained, and anything that has been trained can be retrained. On the second day, something begins to shift. You start catching yourself. You start noticing your thoughts before they take control. You start choosing your words more carefully. You begin to feel a slight difference. Not dramatic, but noticeable. That is the beginning of awareness. And awareness is the doorway to change. By the third day, you will start to experience something powerful. You will feel a sense of control that you didn't have before. You will realize that you are not a victim of your thoughts. You are the author of them. And once you understand that, everything changes. Because if you can control your internal conversation, you can influence your direction. And if you can influence your direction, you can change your destiny. But it starts small. It starts with simple statements. It starts with intentional words. It starts with you deciding that you will no longer be your own worst critic. You will become your own greatest advocate. Now imagine this. If for 3 days you speak life into yourself, if for 3 days you reject every limiting thought, if for 3 days you declare strength, clarity, and purpose over your life, what do you think will happen in 3 weeks, in 3 months, in 3 years? You see, 3 days is not the destination. 3 days is the interruption. It breaks the cycle. It disrupts the pattern. It shows you what is possible. And once you see what is possible, you can never go back to what was comfortable, because now you know. You know that the voice in your head is not fixed. You know that your mindset is not permanent. You know that you have the power to choose your words and therefore shape your life. So I challenge you, not tomorrow, not next week, today, starting now, for the next 3 days, monitor every word you say to yourself. Be intentional. Be disciplined. Be relentless. When negativity shows up, and it will confront it. When doubt appears, and it will replace it. When fear speaks, and it will override it. Because your future is too important to be left to unconscious thinking. Your potential is too valuable to be buried under careless words. And your life is too significant to be shaped by default. You must take responsibility for your internal environment, because whatever dominates your inner world will eventually manifest in your outer world. If chaos is inside, chaos will appear outside. If clarity is inside, direction will appear outside. If confidence is inside, action will follow outside. It always starts within. So for 3 days, build a new environment inside your mind. One where you speak with purpose. One where you think with intention. One where you believe, even if it's just a little more than yesterday, that you are capable of more. Because you are, not someday, not eventually, right now. There is more in you than you have expressed. There is more in you than you have attempted. There is more in you than you have allowed yourself to believe. And it is waiting. Waiting for you to stop speaking limitation and start declaring possibility. Waiting for you to stop agreeing with fear and start aligning with purpose. Waiting for you to stop shrinking and start stepping forward. But it will not force itself out of you. It responds to your voice. So speak. Speak life. Speak growth. Speak strength. Speak vision. Even when it feels uncomfortable. Even when it feels unnatural. Even when nobody else understands what you're doing. Because you are not doing this for them. You are doing this for you. And one day, the results will speak louder than your words ever could. But it begins now with one commitment, with one conversation. The one you have with yourself for 3 days. Change it. And you may just change everything. You cannot consistently act beyond the level of the story you keep telling yourself. Listen carefully, because this is where many people misunderstand their own lives. They try to change their actions without changing their narrative. They attempt to produce different results while holding on to the same internal script. And then they wonder why nothing truly changes. Your life is not just a reflection of what you do. It is a reflection of what you believe about yourself when no one is watching. Because every action you take is first approved by a story. Before you step forward, a story has already spoken. Before you take a risk, a story has already evaluated the outcome. Before you try something new, a story has already defined your limits. And if that story says, This is not who I am. Then no matter how motivated you feel in a moment, you will eventually retreat back to what feels familiar. That is why some people start strong and then stop. That is why some people dream big and then shrink back. That is why some people know what to do, but still don't do it, because knowledge is not the problem. The story is. If your story says, I am inconsistent, then discipline will feel unnatural to you. If your story says, I am not confident, then boldness will feel like a performance instead of a reality. If your story says, I never finish what I start, then even when you begin, you are already preparing to stop, and you may try to fight against it for a while. You may push yourself. You may force effort. You may create temporary momentum. But eventually, your actions will align with your identity. Always. Because human beings are wired to remain consistent with the image they hold of themselves. So if you want to elevate your actions, you must first elevate your story. Not the story you tell others, but the story you repeat to yourself. Now understand this. Your story did not appear out of nowhere. It was built through experiences, built through failures, built through what people said to you, built through what you accepted as truth without questioning it. And over time, that story became your identity. Not because it was accurate, but because it was repeated. And whatever is repeated enough begins to feel permanent. But it is not permanent. It is programmable. That means it can be rewritten. But rewriting a story requires awareness. You must first recognize the script you are living under. Some of you have been living under a quiet narrative that says, I am always behind. So no matter how much progress you make, it never feels like enough. Some of you are living under a story that says, I always mess things up. So even when things are going well, you are waiting for something to go wrong. Some of you are living under a story that says, I don't belong in certain spaces. So you shrink yourself before anyone else has the chance to reject you. And here is the danger. When you believe a story long enough, you stop questioning it. You stop challenging it. You stop recognizing that it is just a story. And you begin to treat it like truth. But not every thought you think is true. Not every conclusion you've drawn about yourself is accurate. Some of it is interpretation. Some of it is assumption. Some of it is fear disguised as fact. And if you do not confront it, it will continue to control you quietly. So for these 3 days, as you begin to change the way you speak to yourself, I want you to also challenge the story behind those words. When you catch yourself saying, I can't do this, ask yourself, who told me that? Was it a real limitation? Or was it a moment that you turned into a lifetime belief? When you hear yourself say, I'm just not that kind of person, ask yourself, according to what? According to your past, according to your comfort zone, according to someone else's opinion. Because if your identity is based on outdated experiences, then you are living in a version of yourself that no longer has to exist. And many people are trapped not by reality, but by outdated self-definitions. They are trying to move forward while dragging an old identity behind them. And it slows everything down. It confuses their decisions. It weakens their commitment. Because part of them wants to grow, but another part of them is loyal to who they used to be. You must decide which version of yourself you are going to be loyal to. Because you cannot move into a new life while protecting an old identity. It doesn't work. Growth requires you to release the story that no longer serves you and that can feel uncomfortable. Because even a limiting story can feel safe when it is familiar. Even a small identity can feel secure when you have lived in it for years. But comfort is not the same as progress. And familiarity is not the same as truth. So when you begin to change your internal language, you are not just changing words. You are challenging identity. You are disrupting patterns. You are confronting beliefs that have been sitting in your mind for years. And that is why it feels difficult. Because you are not just speaking differently. You are becoming different. Now let me make this practical. If your current story says, I am not disciplined, then your new language must say, I am becoming disciplined through consistent action. Not someday, not eventually. Now, because identity is not built on what you hope to be. It is built on what you repeatedly declare and reinforce. If your story says, I am not confident, then your new language must say, I am learning to trust myself more every day. Because confidence is not something you wait for. It is something you build through alignment, through keeping small promises to yourself, through speaking in a way that supports your growth instead of undermining it. You are not trying to lie to yourself. You are training yourself. Training your mind to see possibilities it has ignored. Training your thoughts to support actions they once resisted. Training your identity to expand beyond its previous limits. And training requires repetition. You cannot say something once and expect transformation. You must say it again and again and again until it begins to feel natural, until it begins to feel believable, until it begins to influence how you show up. Because once your story changes, your behavior follows. Effort becomes easier. Consistency becomes more natural. Courage becomes more accessible, not because the world changed, but because you did. Because now your actions are aligned with your identity. And alignment creates momentum. When who you believe you are matches what you are trying to do, there is less resistance, less hesitation, less internal conflict. You move with clarity. You act with conviction, and you begin to see results that once felt out of reach. But if there is a mismatch, if your actions are trying to go one way and your identity is pulling another, you will feel stuck. You will feel inconsistent. You will feel frustrated, not because you lack ability, but because your story is working against you. So do not underestimate the power of what you say to yourself, because every word is reinforcing something. Every thought is strengthening a belief. Every statement is shaping your identity. You are always becoming something through your internal conversation. The question is, what are you becoming? Are you becoming more limited? or more expansive? Are you becoming more doubtful or more confident? Are you becoming more passive or more intentional? Because your life will eventually reflect the answer. And if you want to change the reflection, you must first change the narrative, not externally, internally, quietly, consistently, intentionally, because long before the world sees a new version of you, you must speak it into existence within yourself. Long before others recognize your growth, you must declare it privately. Long before your results change, your story must change. That is where it begins. Not in your circumstances, not in your environment, not in other people, but in the words you repeat when no one else is listening. And for these 3 days, that is your assignment. Not just to speak differently, but to identify the story behind your words and rewrite it in real time. To refuse to let an old identity dictate new decisions. To interrupt patterns that no longer serve you. To declare consistently and intentionally a version of yourself that aligns with where you are going, not where you have been. Because once that story changes, everything else begins to shift with it.